The following program is made possible in part by the Baton Bar Association.
Welcome to You and the Law. I'm Mike Monta, your producer and host for today's program. We're getting started a little late tonight, some technical difficulties, but we're ready to go, and we're going to talk about something which is new in our court system and our mental health community, and that is mental health court, which is kicking off in a way this Thursday. And joining me as expert guests on the show tonight are the Honorable Gregory F. Singer, who is the head of this program, Judge of the Common Pleas Court of Montgomery County, and from the mental health community, Dr. Cara Marciani, who is the Director of Forensic Psychology for Eastway Behavioral system, I think. Is that right? Okay, close enough. We are coming to you live and in color. We'll give you a number to call shortly and display it on the screen so that if you have questions for either of our experts, you may call in. Before we get to our panel discussion, let me remind you that You and the Law is a monthly presentation produced here at the studios of Dayton Access Television. We're coming to you in Dayton on Channel 5. We are the public access channel for Spectrum. I was going to say Time Warner, but it isn't Time Warner anymore, but Spectrum Network here in Dayton. The program's also cable cast in the suburbs on Channel 6, and some places it's 993. And we come to you on tape delay later on through the auspices of the Miami Valley Cable Council. Executive producer for the program is former domestic relations judge Mike Brigner. I hope Mike is watching tonight. We also stream live on datv.org. If you don't have a TV set, you're watching this on your computer, I hope. We are an audience participation program. We are coming to you live in color, and I hope you're not getting the echo I'm getting here in the studio. And you just saw a number there, and that is 223-5311, and you can call in and talk to us. We are sponsored by the Baton Bar Association. Hey, the echo's gone. That's great. Baton Bar Association, we'll talk to you a little bit about them as we go along. Sally Dunker is the executive director, new this year and doing a fantastic job already. So without further ado, let me turn to our guests and have them introduce themselves to you and tell you a little bit more about their backgrounds and familiarity with tonight's topic. And we'll start with Judge Singer. Good evening, Judge. How are you tonight?
Good evening. Thank you, Mike, and thanks to the Bar Association for allowing us to talk about this a little bit. I've been a judge on the Common Pleas Court since 2005, starting, I guess, my 14th year now, and I'm looking forward to the mental health docket, which our court, I am honored to have been chosen by our court to head it up initially, and I serve on a number of committees on the court that no one would care about. And
oh, we care.
That's grew up in Dayton, graduate of Chaminade High School, University of Dayton School of Law.
Thank you, Judge. Good to have you here. And we turn now to Dr. Cara Marciani. Dr. Marciani, this is the first time on my show anyway.
It is.
And nice to have you here. Tell us a little bit about your background and affiliation with our topic tonight.
Sure, thank you for having me. I, unlike you, am a transplant. I actually did most of my schooling here in Ohio, but I'm actually from Kentucky. I am a psychologist. I'm licensed here in Ohio, and I'm board certified in forensic psychology. And I have the privilege of running the local forensic center, the Forensic Psychiatry Center for Western Ohio. And through my work there, I've had the privilege of working with Judge Singer and some of the other judges, both as an evaluator and also as a bit of a consultant on some of their endeavors pertaining to the specialty dockets. So I'm lucky to serve on the advisory committee and advisory board for the mental health docket, and I am very excited about helping get that docket up and running. In addition to those duties, I also function as the forensic monitor for about 11 counties, so I keep track of folks who've been found not guilty by reason of insanity, and as well oversee some treatment that's done out of Eastway for folks who are suffering from serious and persistent mental illnesses.
Okay, thank you. All right, why don't we start by, this is it's a new endeavor for our court and our mental health community. Mental health court, what is it? What's our objectives, and what types of criteria, things like that, are we looking at?
Well, our judges on the Common Pleas bench have long known that
Go ahead.
have long known that when we deal with various criminal activity, mental health is a serious portion of that, and we were fortunate enough to be able to receive initial certification from the Supreme Court, which governs a lot of what we're doing, in December of this year, and we're getting started here, as you say, this week to try to help our folks along in the mental health population.
Dr. Marciani, your connection with this, how did you get involved, and what will be the function of Eastway and your services?
Sure. My primary role is to screen potential participants on the docket. What we're hoping to do is we want to be very respectful of the goals of the docket. And so my office will be looking at potential participants and essentially giving the court an opinion as to whether or not they suffer from a primary severe and persistent mental illness. So we'll be part of that initial screening process. We also will be providing treatment to folks who are on the docket. Eastway Behavioral Health Care is one of the largest providers of outpatient mental health services to adults in Montgomery County. And so we'll be available to provide both psychiatric care, case management, and therapeutic services for folks that are on the docket.
Judge, what's the criteria? I mean, the criminal court's involved in this. And I guess we should probably try to differentiate between insanity and incompetence and not just mental illness, but as opposed to those other legal categories. What types of folks are we getting into these programs, and how are we trying to help them and the community?
Well, that requires a description of the docket a little bit. It's
okay.
It's a little different from the drug court, which we've had for years and years, in that we have because it's a mental illness, we have a very narrow focus on the folks that we intend to participate in this. That includes that they must be been convicted of a felony or participating in intervention in lieu of conviction. They must have not be involved in seriously violent or other crimes or serious sex crimes. Those folks will not be eligible for participation, and our charter limits us to 20 individuals, and so we've got a lot more than that who suffer from various degrees and levels of mental illness, who are involved in criminal activity, and so we're very careful trying to find the most seriously, persistently and seriously mental ill, and folks, and also, and this is very important, those who would be amenable to the kind of services and treatment that we hope to establish in the court.
Okay, so no sex crimes, no violent crimes. Now our system is, our felony system is set up in different categories, one to 5. Is there a delineation of what types of those degrees will be allowed or disallowed?
No, not per se.
Okay.
It tends to be because the felony 1s and felony 2s, being the more serious crimes, tend to be involve more violence.
Okay.
And sex offenses. There are fewer of those that would be able to participate.
And I didn't ask you about drug offenses, and of course they run the gamut from felony 1 right down to felony 5. Are they eligible for treatment in this program?
Absolutely. In fact, in preparing for this docket, staff and I traveled to various mental health dockets throughout the state of Ohio and learned that most of our participants will in fact have addiction issues as well. And I think Dr. Marciani would indicate she's not surprised by that.
No, not at all. They co-occur. They co-occur for a large proportion of folks who have a psychiatric illness.
Well, I guess my question was, if say you committed a drug offense, which was a first-degree felony, is it still possible to be part of this program? Or haven't we ironed that out yet? Well, when I say we, I mean you.
Felony 1 drug offenses, generally speaking, entail mandatory sentencing, and our participants must be on probation, so that would probably not be an eligible participant.
Okay, so the folks who get into this is it part of the plea bargaining in their case to get into it, or is it after they've been found guilty one way or the other that somebody recommends them as a potential candidate?
We have opened it up to our screening process, which is pretty well involved, to any manner of referral sources. These would include probation officers, defense lawyers, families, and the like, and we're not, anyone can recommend to mentalhealth@mottcourt.org a mental health participant, which would be then, of course, subject to our admission criterion.
Well, let's talk about the criteria, and this is where Dr. Marciani comes in. How would you get involved? Would the referrals come from the court or the probation department?
Yeah, so the referrals are being funneled to us through Judge Singer's court.
Okay.
Essentially, they send us some information on a potential participant, and attached with that information is a release of information form that allows us to get records, basically medical records, pertaining to the individual's treatment if they've had mental health treatment. And so we conduct a review of their records to try to get a sense of their historical patterns and whether or not they have a long-standing pattern of psychiatric symptoms. We as well attempt to meet with the potential participant face-to-face. We want to do kind of our own face-to-face screening so we can get a feel for the person, for lack of a better way to put it. And then on top of that, we conduct any testing that is deemed necessary for that specific offender. As an example, if we are talking with someone who appears to have some intellectual impairments, we'll give them an IQ test as an example to get a sense of where their abilities fall. We as well can do other personality testing if we think it's indicated. And essentially, we formulate an opinion as to whether or not the individual suffers from a primary mental illness, as their primary diagnosis.
What type of illnesses, I'm sure our audience would like to know, fall into these categories?
Sure. So there are a variety of psychiatric illnesses for which treatment is indicated. Most of the folks, though, that will be appropriate for the docket will fall into one of four categories, one of four kind of broad categories. Those would be individuals who suffer from major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or schizoaffective disorder. Most folks are going to fall into one of those four categories. We nevertheless, though, expect to see some folks that have post-traumatic stress disorder as a primary diagnosis, and we as well may see folks that have an anxiety disorder as a primary diagnosis.
Do the potential participants in this program, you talked about their background. First of all, do the HIPAA requirements come into this? They have to consent to you reading all the records.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so Judge Singer's staff gets them to sign release from the get-go. Now, if we want to get additional records, let's say we're talking to somebody and they disclose that they had a head injury 2 years ago, and we want to get a sense of how catastrophic that injury was, we can execute additional releases should we need to do that.
Okay, then after the testing is done, you don't do the testing yourself. You read the evaluations, or do you do some of it?
So I oversee the testing that's done.
And review the evaluations by your staff.
Correct, yes.
Okay. So.
And lay eyes on them if I need to. If there's any question, I look at them myself.
All right. So you're looking for, as the judge said, amenability. That means somebody who would cooperate in their own treatment, I guess.
Right.
And what else would you find as criteria to report back to Judge Singer's court that this person would be?
So there are three kind of broad categories. One is primary diagnosis. Again, do they suffer from a severe and persistent mental illness as a primary diagnosis? Second is cognitive ability. Do they have the intellectual ability to meet the demands of being on an intensive docket? And then amenability, which essentially means, do they have insight? Do they understand that they have a severe and persistent mental illness? Are they willing to participate in a docket knowing that it's going to be more intensive than the docket that they're on now, as examples?
Okay. We're going to take a very brief break here. We don't have commercials on You and the Law, but we do stop to talk about our sponsor, the Dayton Bar Association, and what they do for us, and why they're sponsoring us, I guess, and some of the benefits. And Judge, if I leave some out here, I know that you're very familiar with these. Please tell us all about it. The Dayton Bar Association has been in existence since 1883, when Chester A. Arthur was the President of the United States. And we provide community services for the benefit of not only our professionals, but Miami Valley citizens. Some of the things that we are involved in are a lawyer referral service. If you do not have a lawyer and you need assistance in locating one, the number is 222-6102, and they will find somebody in our association that can help you or potentially guide you in the right direction. We have a notary public service for applications and testing. If you wanted to become a notary, or you work for somebody that thinks they need a notary, you can take the test and become a notary. A very important program that we have, volunteer members creating wills for first responders, police, fire, EMTs, is called Wills for Heroes. And we have that once a month. And if you call the Bar Association at 222-7902, they will tell you when the next meeting is. And they're on Saturdays, and they're usually 10 to 2. Very valuable program. If you fall into that category, you don't have a will, call in, find out about it. Our website is www.daybar.org, and they have reference information, guides to services, legal rights to courts, etc. Any more than that I ought to talk about, you think? Does that pretty much get it? I think we told you Sally Dunker is the And she used to work down at, I think, Channel 12 in Cincinnati a number of years ago, but now we're lucky to have her services as executive director. You are watching You and the Law. Presently, we're coming to you live and in color. We are talking about the Mental Health Court, which is about to start on this Thursday in the Montgomery County Common Pleas Court, and we have expert guests here, the Honorable Gregory F. Singer, who heads up the program, and Dr. Cara Marciani. Did I pronounce your name right?
Close enough.
I think I got the Marciani right, because I used to watch Rocky Marciano box years ago. But the Cara?
Cara.
All right. Dr. Cara Marciani, who is the Director of Forensic Psychology for Eastway Behavioral Services. So, our number is 223-5311. There it is, right below me there. And if you have a question about mental health court, either in our area or any area you may be in, please call in. Our experts can tell you more than I've told you about it in great detail if they need to. So let's talk about what happens once they've fulfilled the criteria to be in this program. And it's a probationary program, isn't that right, Judge? I mean,
It is.
If you're charged with a crime, you can't just say, well, I don't want to plead guilty, but I'd love to be in the program. You can't do that. You have to be guilty of something, right?
Right.
And not insane and not incompetent, right?
Well, we like to think that if they're not guilty, they would defend the charge.
Yes, right. Okay. So what happens after they are initiated into the program?
Well, we have a dedicated probation officer to whom they will report on probation. They will attend a specialized docket in our court every other week. And at that docket, our staff and the probation department and our treatment staff, comprised of volunteers from Eastway, South Community Mental Health, to just name a couple, who support us, will meet with that client, make sure that there's, first and foremost important to us is that they're getting their medications and taking them in a timely fashion, because one of the primary objectives of the docket is to make sure that the participant is remaining stabilized on their medications. And after that comes kind of life coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Are there transportation issues? Are there issues with food? Are there issues in the event of those who are employed with any employment? And we try to help these participants navigate through those issues.
Well, you're probably answering a lot of the question I'm going to ask, which is, how is the mental health court and its probationary status different from just regular standard probation for a person who has committed a crime but not incarcerated?
Well, it's an intensive supervision. And intensive, for example, entails more reporting to the court than does a basic supervised probationer. It requires more frequent drug testing. It requires more programs. For example, if anger is an issue, we'll have them involved in anger management and such as that. So it's more intensive, I guess, in a nutshell.
And if I may add something, I think the expectation as well is that the treatment providers will work closely with the probation department on these cases, and that there's going to be a free exchange of communication. The idea being that by kind of joining together and wrapping more services around the participant, that'll increase their likelihood for success. So there is an expectation that the treatment provider and the probation officer are going to work very collaboratively together and intensely together.
Is there any special training of the staffs then? I mean, out at Eastway, you're primarily concerned with mental health treatment in
Right.
court. It's kind of a mix now with this part of the probation. So do you need to train staff differently in both areas?
Well, we think so. As a matter of fact, our probation officer is a licensed, certified clinician. The rest of our staff who works on this in my office, they have been to crisis intervention training on a week-long 40-hour training. They've also attended a number of webinars that we've arranged for them, so that they'll be familiar with the kind of folk that we're going to be dealing with and prepared for that.
Does the probation officer specialize just for the mental health court, or are they generally doing other cases too?
Well, our probation officer who's assigned to our
Right.
docket has for many years worked with mental health patients, and so she's very well experienced in that, and we're delighted to have her on our team.
But are they just concentrating on the mental health court, or are they still doing other duties in the probation department? In other words, overseeing other probation.
In this case, our probationer is, though her caseload is being reduced by
Okay.
20 to accommodate, or as many as 20 to accommodate her added duties in the mental health docket. Did that answer your question?
Yes. I was looking at our floor director. He's telling me we have a phone call, and I think we'd like to take that. Good evening. You're on You and the Law.
Hi, I had a question.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering, with this program, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like part of the rehabilitation is including mental health treatment. Is that also including medication, or is it more of therapy and follow-up and trying to treat the underlying mental health issues?
All right. I think we
Right.
understood that.
Yeah, sure.
Go
No,
ahead.
and the idea is to treat the underlying mental health problem. And in doing so, participants will have access to treatment providers who can give them medication. They can also provide them with therapy or counseling services and case management services. In addition, there are housing opportunities and vocational training opportunities that are available to participants that are on this docket. So if the individual needs to learn some vocational skills to help them get a job, we can funnel them to a program that will teach them the needed skills that will allow them to obtain employment in the community.
Judge, anything to add?
No, that's exactly right. We, as judges, part of the oath we swear is to reduce recidivism, and to the extent that we have folks, particularly in the mental health community, being arrested time and time again, it's not that we want to be soft on these folks, but we need to understand what the issues are, because the cost to society and the taxpayers of repeated arrests, prosecutions, and the like are far greater than if we can get the appropriate diagnosis, assessment, and treatment to prevent that recidivism.
All right. Does that answer your question?
It does, and I'm not sure, it was hard for me to hear, but in terms of any financial responsibility, is there any requirement of insurance cooperation, or is it entirely funded by government money?
Well, that's a good question, and a lot of times just in regular probation, I think the judge will agree with this, that the cost of probation is put onto the probationers, But in this case, it's a little bit different, right?
Yeah, in terms of the treatment costs, most of the participants will have Medicaid coverage. So that will cover the cost of their meds, their psychiatric visits, case management visits, and the like. So they will not be assessed a fee to participate in the therapeutic services that they're getting.
Okay. So does that answer that question for you?
Yes, and my last question is, if the participant is prescribed medication, and a lot of times with the mental health, diagnoses, medication can be an ongoing, lifelong thing. Is that something where, when the case ends in mental health court, that those follow-ups end as well, or how is that treated?
And the expectation is that folks will continue to have ongoing access to treatment with the provider of their choice once they are removed from the docket. Their access to treatment does not end once their participation in the docket ends.
Okay. Any follow-up from that?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you for some very intuitive questioning there. And thanks for watching us. So, okay, they were talking about the drugs, and we talked a little bit before, our caller did, and there's overlap in these things, isn't there? The mental health and abuse of drugs. Is there an attempt to coordinate the treatment with those two different types of abuses?
Yeah, so we learned this, our bench did in our drug courts, and that is, we can't really deal with addiction unless we deal with some aspect of mental health. Addiction is, after all, a mental health disorder, and to the extent that we need to, it requires a dual stabilization for that dual diagnosis. We need to keep folks on their mental health psychotropic medications. At the same time, we need to keep people sober from opiates.
Wait, okay, but you don't necessarily have to have a drug addiction to be have one of the mental illnesses, right? I mean, it's just you're finding that it happens more often than not, I guess.
Correct. They tend to co-occur. Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about benefits. First of all, to the court and society, what's going to be the benefit of this? And I'm guessing there's an extra expense to the mental health court and the coordination with the mental health community. What is society and the legal system getting out of this, do you think? You wouldn't be doing it if there wasn't some benefit, but let's...
Well, perhaps we can discuss some of our court's goals with this. First of all, we would like to, the little piece that criminal justice can add to these public health issues is that we can enforce a little bit of accountability. And so
we're also trying not to warehouse these folks who have a problem other than just committing crimes, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And we also want to reduce homelessness in the community by transitioning these folks, the mentally ill population, who frankly comprise statistically at least 90% of our homeless population. We would like to get them into a, ultimately, if possible, if they're, if they're level, into independent living to the extent possible.
Yeah, and understand that these are the folks that my agency has been treating for years. These are our people.
Right.
What helps us is to have that extra level of accountability and responsibility that court involvement imparts. So we have another layer of supervision via the probation officer, who is committed to working closely with us around the person's care. We also have the investment of Judge Singer, who will be, seeing these folks every other week. When you build a lot of structure and supervision, into the day of a person with a psychiatric illness, that inherently helps them. And so the idea here is that we are building a foundation through which they can get the treatment they need, learn additional skills that they need, and hopefully get housing and vocational stuff in line so that they can have a good foundation to build upon, and then once they're off the docket, live an independent and healthy and satisfactory life.
I'm guessing that folks that do have these problems and do commit crimes aren't the best people for jails and prisons. They create not only problems for themselves, but for those institutions. Would that be a benefit for trying to sort some of this out without sending them off?
That's.
And I know you have some dealings with the jail and some of the oversight. And
Yeah.
So
Our county jails are not constructed for the purpose of being mental health institutions,
Right.
or frankly, drug detox centers. They are simply to house folks who are a danger to themselves or society while they're awaiting trial or serving a minimal sentence. And one of our objectives is with the mental health docket is that we will reduce the jail, prison, and institution days that this population spends locked up at a cost to society, and we think that those savings ultimately, when treated in the community as opposed to incarceration, will amount to a great cost savings.
do these sort of problems, and you might be putting the cart before the horse type of thing, but do they go hand in hand sort of with bail reform and maybe having folks who are awaiting trial or awaiting pleas maybe be better off getting out into something rather than being locked up, not being able to make bail?
Well,
Or is that too complex?
That's a very big topic these days, Mike, and
Right.
and some of it is perhaps better for another show. But yes, to the extent that police officers might have a place to take an addict with a needle in his or her arm, or a decompensated mental health patient to a place besides the Montgomery County Jail, that's ultimately what we're looking for and working for on a number of levels, and our entire community is working on that as well. And yes, the jail is not, in many cases, not a very humane place to have our mentally ill folks. Frankly, it's not very humane to have our drug addicts detox on the floor of the Montgomery County Jail among their own bodily fluids,
Well,
without being too graphic.
Well, our jails and prisons can only function if the inmates can receive and follow the orders of the corrections officers. Would that be a fair statement? And these folks are probably have a hard time doing that.
Right, they have to function within that context.
Right.
Right.
Making it harder for both prisoners and the corrections officers, I'm guessing.
Yes, and the sheriff has not too long ago taken and hired an addiction and mental health specialist in the jail to interface with these folks and try to work with the folks in the jail to deal with these populations and get them the proper treatment, especially when they get out and so forth. And it's an issue in the jail, and certainly once we have the wherewithal to provide crisis stabilization in a more humane manner outside of the jail, the better off I think our community is going to be. Now, this, of course, costs lots of money, and we don't yet have that financial wherewithal for that. But a lot of good folks in public health and the Adamus Board and the County Commission are working on that issue.
Is this a case of maybe needing to take small steps toward the goal before you can achieve the bigger objectives?
I think so. It's
Yeah, it's inherently a dynamic process because there are a lot of pieces that have to come together. I mean, this is a complex problem we're trying to solve, and complex problems typically require complex solutions. So yeah, I mean, I think we've always sort of conceptualized the work that's being done in Montgomery County as being something that has been incremental and done in a stepwise and planful manner. And this is sort of the next step in the bigger plan.
Okay, we're going to take a very short break to let you know, again, if you haven't guessed, you're watching You and the Law here on Spectrum Channel 5, DATV, and we were talking about mental health court, an innovative project headed up by one of our expert guests, Honorable Gregory F. Singer, Judge of the Common Pleas Court, not the only judge, but Judge of the Common Pleas Court. How many do we have now, 13 or something
11.
like that? 11.
11
Okay.
general division judges.
Just like a football team. You're the Philadelphia Eagles of the court system. So, and Dr. Kara Marciani, who is Director of Forensic Psychology at Eastway. If you have, we're coming to you live and in color, and you can call in. It's an audience participation program. 223-5311. Maybe they'll put that up over my face here on your screen. There it is. It's not over it. Leave it up a little longer. Maybe some folks, they might not have as good a retention as we hope. Or write it down or have a pencil to do it. But if you do have a question, it's a very intriguing topic, and we're honored to have Dr. Marciani and Judge Singer as guests here tonight. So, okay. One of the things that struck me that you were talking about earlier is that our homeless population generally has some sort of mental illness problem.
Yes.
It's not completely converse. You're homeless because you're mentally ill or anything, right?
The two are very intertwined. And some argue that folks that are homeless because they're mentally ill.
Okay, so they've committed a crime, they're homeless, and we're talking about getting them housing and getting them out to Eastway. They probably don't have a car either, or I don't know if they take buses or
Yes.
have the capability of...
Some do.
Okay.
Some do. And that, in part, is one of the functions of the case management services that are available. So clients are assigned to a team, a treatment team, and they are assigned a case manager whose job it is to fill gaps for them. So they can assist them with getting bus passes if they're able to use the bus. They can transport them to important appointments if they need to do that. They can arrange for project mobility or other specialized transportation services if they're needed. So that's the primary function of the case manager, is to be the boots on the ground and filling gaps.
Okay, you said that the folks come to the Common Pleas Court. We haven't started yet. We're starting Thursday, but as of this time, how many are in right now?
I think we've just accepted our 4th or 5th participant.
Okay, and these
I've got
are
another one coming your way.
Okay, good.
okay, and these are from the 11 judges' dockets, right?
Right, exactly. Yes.
Okay, and I'm guessing the first criteria must be a probation officer thinks that they should be eligible for probation, and then somebody determines that this is a unique facet of their personality or their background that they should be considered for this?
Yes.
Okay. And that is referred to you then at the health court level?
Right. We have a staff that reviews that applicant for what we call the legalities. Is it one of the prohibited offenses for which they have been found guilty?
Okay.
Is it, and of course, is there so strong indication before we send it to Dr. Marciani that there is some serious and persistent mental illness that is involved in the commission of that crime?
Okay. Dr. Marciani, you're not involved just in our mental health court. You have treatment in many of the surrounding counties. Do the other counties have this type of mental health court? Or are they initiating them, and are you involved?
I'm not involved in any such activities in the other counties that I serve, no. Other counties will have expressed an interest in starting up similar dockets.
Okay. Are there others in Ohio, Judge?
Yes, there are mental health dockets in all of the major counties, including now Montgomery.
We're a major county, right?
Exactly.
Now we have one.
Not just now, but especially now. So the folks who, and I don't know how many of the 4 or 5 are homeless, or if there are any that are homeless, they've been living on the street and apparently committing some sort of nonviolent crimes. What are we doing? Where are we putting them? And when they get this probation, don't they have a tendency to stay homeless? Or
I think they do. I'm not experienced enough to answer that, but
And there are
the doctor
housing
is.
opportunities for folks that
Okay.
qualify, who have a severe and persistent mental illness as a primary diagnosis. There are like group homes where folks can live.
Okay.
There are housing subsidies that folks can qualify for that will offset the cost to live in an apartment in the community. So the housing opportunities range in level of restrictiveness, for lack of a better way to put it. Some are supervised but to a lesser degree, and then some are completely independent.
Okay, and not every, I think we established this already, everybody that is homeless, or everybody in the program is not necessarily homeless. So what are we doing with those folks, the ones that might have family support or a significant other or something like that?
Yeah, and from my perspective, from a clinical perspective, so long as the family support is appropriate, it's healthy, I would see no reason for them not to continue to live in an environment that they previously were living in. If the family support isn't healthy, if other folks are using drugs or they're enabling, the offender to engage in behavior that's not conducive to maintaining their well-being, then we got to look at that and come up with some alternatives for them. Behind meds, stable housing is the second most important piece to stability.
Is the treatment in this probation, is it more civically involved, or are you actually trying to somehow alleviate their mental illnesses also?
Oh yeah, the whole point is to have symptom reduction to the greatest extent possible.
Okay. All right, both in learning how to deal with society as well as getting healthier mentally.
Right.
you
Their
think?
ability to better cope with society is going to be tied to the severity of their symptoms. So the healthier an individual is, the better they will be able to cope and function.
What about one of the things my clients, when they get put on probation, the judge always says, now you got to get a job, or at least make a significant effort. Folks that have been homeless obviously haven't had jobs recently. What's the criteria for them then? Can you force people to get jobs?
And there are readiness programs that are available. Yeah, that'll help folks learn job readiness skills. There's supported employment that will allow somebody to have a job coach to assist them when they do obtain a job. So there are resources for that.
Okay.
In learning about this, Mike, it was eye-opening to me that mental illness is treatable. I always tend to think, I think like many, that
It's static, right?
No,
Can't
it's a
do
very
anything.
dynamic process.
yeah.
Okay.
And so, to a lesser or greater extent, once stabilized on medication, we have seriously mentally ill folks functioning in Dr. Marciani's role right here in Ohio, and some in food service, and just depending on the seriousness. And
Are drugs more, or are they implemented more in cure of the mental illnesses now than they used to be way back when you just put people in a home or something and lock them away? Or
And when you say drugs, you mean medication?
medication, yes. Right.
Yeah, anytime you're dealing with a severe and persistent mental illness, medication is going to be a key foundational part of the treatment. Folks have chemical imbalances, and that's what the medication is designed to treat. So that is a cornerstone to the treatment process, is medication compliance.
Do more people, let me ask you it this way, are there studies that show that there are more imbalances than in the population that we thought existed before? In other words, folks who are just a little odd, or they have a funny way of going about things. Are they from chemical imbalances? Do studies show that there's more of that?
I think the best way to think of it is a continuum.
Okay.
Everything lies on a continuum. So folks can have symptoms to varying degrees. So you have your folks that are a bit eccentric. They fall on the low end of the continuum, whereas somebody who's floridly psychotic falls at the opposite end.
Okay. Now, we talked about benefits, and we don't have a whole lot of time here, but benefits. What benefits can the person who gets this probation get legally? Or is that in a state of process right now? Can you have your case thrown out, for instance, or reduced, or?
we aren't to that point yet.
Okay.
And I think that at some point that bears exploring, because after all, it ought not be a crime to be mentally ill, and if certain crimes are directly related to mental illness, that's something I think that there's some folks in the legislature who are looking at that now, and beginning with, I think, some expungement or sealing of records, and I think that's being looked at.
Okay,
but
so
it's down the road.
Not necessarily dismissing the case, but maybe sealing it. In the event that there are no further offenses, couldn't be used against them.
Right.
All right. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left. And I've talked about this as being innovative, and I applaud you both for getting involved in this. How have other programs fared as far as success in this field? Again, what have studies shown is happening in this field?
In a program such as mental health
The
specialty?
mental health course. Is it working or is it not working?
Well, it's
Or is it too early to tell?
too early to tell for us to know, but
Right.
it's been continuing and not abandoned in every docket of which I'm aware, so it must have some benefit. And I think, Doctor, you would know more than I, but I think we're more special attention where the mental health population is more valued just in the human sphere. I think that folks are going to do much better, and we learned recently about how in a healthy social environment this population fares much better, and so to the extent that we can provide one-on-one, small group on-one to these folks, we believe that it's going to have a benefit.
And that general approach is known to have a good therapeutic benefit to folks who are getting mental health treatment.
Do the folks that are involved in this feel as though people care about them more? Because they're not just being say, well, you're just bonkers and we're going to lock you up, or finish your probation, pay your fees, and get out of our hair. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a piece of it. I think folks also appreciate having the added support. I mean, life is hard, and it's particularly hard if, you know, you're not oriented to reality all the time. And I think they ultimately benefit from having the added layers of support that come with participation in a docket such as this.
Okay. You have to stop right there. Our floor director is telling us that we are out of time. And you have been watching You and the Law. We've been talking about mental health court, an innovative project of the Montgomery County Common Pleas Court. We've been privileged to have as expert guests on our show the Honorable Gregory F. Singer, judge of the Common Pleas Court here in Montgomery County, and Dr. Kara Marciani, Director of Forensic Psychology at Eastway, Behavioral. And I want to thank all the volunteers behind the scenes who have made this program possible. And a final good night to Lily, Katie, and Everett. I've been your producer and host. Thank you for joining us on You and the Law. We'll see you again next time. Good night.